Questions to his leader, and just a few questions. Dr. Barkindo, we are talking about energy transition, and energy transitions means the D's that Miguel Antonians has mentioned means electrification, but also we saw that on the 40 million possible increase of demand of oil from here to 2040, the biggest increase was petrochemicals. So in that general view, what would you say were the challenge and role of oil in this energy transition?
Thank you very much, Emilio. As I've said, oil has played a key role in fueling the current civilization as we know it. The unprecedented growth, development, and prosperity that we have seen or enjoyed in this current civilization has been fueled by oil. And we have seen in the various projections, including that of OPEC and other agencies, that oil will continue to play the dominant role in the energy mix for the foreseeable future. This mix will be driven key or chiefly by transportation and petrochemicals, as you have just mentioned. The diversification of the use of oil necessitates that we should continue to invest in technologies that will be able to adapt oil to petrochemical use, to chemical use, in order to meet the growing demand for current and future populations. We have seen in these projections that additional 1.6 billion people will come into this world between now and 2040. Petrochemicals will play a leading role in the adaptation of oil in an environmentally friendly manner and to optimize the use of this source of energy to meet the daily needs of these teeming populations.
Thank you. Second question, talking about OPEC and its future. This declaration of cooperation, it looks like, is not a short-term reaction to 2016 crisis, but is working well and has got a quite brilliant future ahead. What would you say about it? What are your thoughts beyond this declaration of cooperation with Russia, further countries, or how could you see it could expand?
When we finally inked on the declaration of cooperation on that fateful day of 10th of December 2016 in snowy Vienna, we came to the conclusion, based on what we went through from 2014 to date and how our industry suffered, impacted upon negatively, how livelihoods were affected. Hundreds of companies have filed for bankruptcies. Thousands of jobs have been lost. I made reference to the contraction in investments. Companies withdrew from investing, either by deferring projects or outrightly freezing them. And we decided, together with our non-OPEC partners, led by the Russian Federation, today we were 24 countries in this room. And we knew what it took us and how long it took us to be able to assemble 24 sovereign nations to come and take a common decision and agree to implement jointly in order to pull the industry out of this cycle that has become the longest, the worst downturn that our industry has known. We therefore decided that we should work towards keeping this partnership together. We should not wait for another cycle before we start running from capital to capital to invite producers to come and rescue the industry. It was a unanimous decision that we needed to stay together. We needed to work together in the interest of not only ourselves as producers, but also in the interest of consuming countries. Because for the first time we have seen that consuming countries have also been impacted by this downturn. And I will tell you a short story.
Please do.
On that morning of the 10th of December, after we signed this agreement, the following morning on the 11th, the first visitor I received in my office was the Japanese Minister of METI, of the economy, one of the biggest consumers of energy in the world. And he came, when I saw him, I thought he came to complain. To the contrary, he said he came to congratulate us for what we did, because his economy had been battling deflation. And part of that deflationary pressures were attributed to the consequence of this downturn. So we saw for the first time that it was not only producers, but also consumers welcomed this collaborative effort of OPEC and non-OPEC, taking this common decision in the interest of all, as well as the global economy. Now, coming from Algiers yesterday, we are determined to make this work, to make it more permanent, to institutionalize this cooperation. Therefore, we are in intensive consultations with our non-OPEC partners on the modus operandi of this collaboration.
Well, after coming from Algiers, it's really relevant, but as some decisions in Algiers were postponed to Vienna, it looks like the market is still growing, still coming up. We are over $80 now. There is a question about price. And you can always consider what is a stability and what is balance between demand and supply and demand, but what is stability in price and how these price big fluctuations has generated problems on investments and on this sort of cycles. So not only saying what is the demand, but what do you think would be your projection about price? Because needing the 11 trillion in over 20 years, you must need really a price reference to support those investments.
Thank you. Stability has been at the core and has been central to the OPEC statute itself, which you quoted in your opening remarks. Stability is not only good for us producers and companies such as CEPSA that need to plan in the short, medium, and long term, but also good for the consuming public. Without stability, as you rightly said, it would be a huge challenge to be able to continue to attract the quantum, the level, and the timely deployment of capital and technology to continue to invest in this industry of ours, which is very capital intensive in a very competitive world where other sectors are also competing from the same source of capital with us, and in addition, facing these challenges of the environment, climate, and sustainable development. Therefore, we need to maintain this stability and sustain it to be able to continue to entice investors both within OPEC, within non-OPEC, and the banking community that give us credit. But you know, we in OPEC, as a matter of principle, we do not hinge our decisions on price per se. Price is left to the market to determine. The declaration of cooperation was hinged on balancing the equation of supply and demand because one of the variables in that equation, that is stocks, has gone out of balance. Stocks, as a result of the supply that outpaced demand between 2014 and 2016, built up to over 400 million barrels over the 5-year industry average, and hence sent the equation into disequilibrium. In order to rebalance that equation, we, together with our partners, focused on that one variable, which is stocks. How would we assist the market to bring down these stocks from these unprecedented levels to around the 5-year average? And we decided cumulatively to adjust our supply, global supply, by about 1.8 million barrels a day. 1.2 million out of that contributed by OPEC, about 600,000 barrels a day contributed by the non-OPEC over a period of time, beginning from January 2017. It took us 18 months up to June of this year to be able to accomplish that task. When we met in Vienna in June, we reviewed the implementation and found out that the industry stock overhang had even surpassed the 5-year average and went well beyond the 5-year average. So you will agree with me that it is a continuous balancing process. This equation is highly dynamic, chiefly so because there are other extraneous factors which both yourself and Pedro made reference to that are totally beyond our control, which impacts on this equation on a continuous basis. And hence the need for us to stay together with our non-OPEC partners, continue to monitor the market, continue to take joint action proactively, if needs be, to at least maintain that balance on a sustainable basis.
Thank you very much. So addressing now, as we are having a table on geopolitics, we would like to ask, of course, geopolitics impacts a lot the oil market. And what would you think that would be the best way to provide a global energy security for producers and consumers?
Energy security is a must. We have an obligation as producers to continue to supply the world with energy in a reliable and dependable manner. For us to be able to achieve this noble objective, we have to continue to attract the necessary investments in a timely fashion across the supply chain. For us to do that, we need calmer waters in the geopolitics, because the geopolitics are beyond us. It is for others to handle. But we look up to them to be able to overcome these challenges as quickly as they rise. The world can never be insulated from geopolitics, but the ability to insulate us as energy producers, I think, is vital.
Well, now we'll take a few questions that were made through the Slido. The first of all, you have almost addressed partly, but it's, could OPEC take any decision about oil production if prices continue to climb after Iran sanctions? Could we see prices about $90 or $100?
In Algiers, a couple of days ago, we reviewed the supply-demand dynamics. We reviewed the level of conformity of all producing countries within the Declaration of Cooperation, and we reiterated the resolution that we took in Vienna on June 22nd, that we will do whatever it takes to continue to remain reliable and dependable suppliers of oil to global markets. We will ensure that energy crisis in terms of supply does not affect the global economy. Of course, the factors that are driving these dynamics are not from our side, but because we are all in this same world and we all have these common objectives, it is important that we continue to cooperate across the divide to ensure that we do not move from one crisis to another. And all our member countries are determined to ensure that we're able to manage this situation through this trying period.
Thank you very much. There is a question about emissions. Let's say that OPEC World Outlook less emitting scenarios is almost 30 gigatons of CO2 by 2040. Are climate risk arising from it compatible with a sustainable growth and a stable society?
Global growth and development have proven to be compatible with lower carbon emissions. I think we have gone past that at the moment. What we should focus on is how do we convince policymakers, especially in the industrialized countries like the EU, and producers of energy, particularly the corporate world, like CEPSA, to work around the framework of the Paris Agreement in order to address carbon emissions, not oil or gas or coal per se. The application and adaptation of these technologies supported by policies from these industrialized countries like the EU would make it possible for us to continue to optimize the use of all sources of energy in an environmentally friendly manner to meet this rising demand that we are seeing. The demand is phenomenal. It's over 33%. Therefore, all these sources of energy must be utilized.
One or two more questions to finalize. What are the principal measures that are being taken by OPEC members to improve the energy efficiency and to develop cleaner energies? Efficiency is part of the clue.
You will be amazed that several of our member countries have embarked on huge reforms in their energy sectors, driven by the need to improve efficiency to address the issues of climate change. Although, according to the core principles of the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change, which I made reference to in my presentation, the core principles of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities does not require our member countries to take these commitments, but they have decided in the interest of their people, in the interest of their future generations, being part of this world, we should also take what we refer to as non-regret measures to play our own part. Some of the investments that are being made by our member countries are almost comparable to the industrialized countries. Therefore, contrary to the perception in the media, we belong to this world. We are committed to ensuring that growth and development of all sources of energy must be in accordance with the best environmental credentials to address the issue of climate change. Climate change does not know any borders. It affects all of us in this world. And therefore, all must take action according to this principle. We have no alternative at the moment to the Paris Agreement. And it is only through this multilateral process, bringing nations, corporate organizations, the civil society together, that we can move on the right path of combating climate change.
Thank you very much. We're running a little bit out of time, so for the last question, could you please explain briefly the main basis of the reference case?
The reference case is part of every outlook. Every outlook must have a reference case, and hence also the OPEC outlook. If you go through the IEA World Outlook, the EIA World Outlook, all outlooks, including CEPSA, I believe, they also have a reference case.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you for your words and for all the work you have been doing with OPEC, leading the movement that hopefully will give us stability and will give a balanced supply-demand scenario for the future. So thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you.